Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a very controversial topic. I really don't understand why it's so controversial, but it is. Breastfeeding, the most natural thing to do. I recently shared a post on my Instagram that got picked up by mom.me. It also got picked up by several Instagram accounts that are pretty big accounts that are just like inspirational accounts that I follow, which was really cool to see a lot of people react to this post that I made. And it was basically just an apology letter to moms that are tried to breastfeed, because I've only really showed the highlights of my breastfeeding journey, and I've never really shared how difficult it was for me. So I just want to remind everyone, I'm not a lactation consultant. It's just me giving my experience on breastfeeding, and it's solely my experience. So with that being said, I just want to remind everyone that we all have our individual experiences. My experience isn't necessarily going to be your experience, but it could definitely help or inspire, or you can relate to it, or maybe you don't relate to it at all and your journey is completely different, and that's okay. I've attempted to make this video several times before, and I was so overwhelmed by the amount of information I felt I needed to provide because there's so much breastfeeding information out there. I just got overwhelmed and I ended up not editing it, turning off the camera several times. Maybe I just wasn't in a place to like share or speak on it. I feel like now with 6 months of exclusively breastfeeding experience under my belt, I feel a little bit more comfortable speaking about it, I guess. When I was pregnant, I really didn't know that breastfeeding was going to become such a big part of my life. I didn't know I would exclusively breastfeed. I didn't know that I would become such an ambassador for breastfeeding. I didn't know how difficult it would be. I really did minimal research prior to having birth, which was crazy because I was so research oriented with everything else, more like what's gonna happen when I deliver, that I really didn't prepare myself for, you know, what's gonna happen after. One of the biggest time-consuming things is breastfeeding. I always just looked at mommy's breastfeeding pictures and saw how beautiful they looked, how empowering it looked, and I was just simply inspired by that. Because the pictures did look effortless, I didn't really realize how much effort there is into breastfeeding. I did have to pull in some deep down inner strength. That's why it's really important for me to make this video. I tried to like create a structure, but this is gonna kind of just come from my heart and I'm just gonna go with the flow, you know? So if I forget to mention something or you have certain questions about something, please leave it in the description bar below. If I get enough questions where I feel like I need to make a follow-up video to this video, then I will. Otherwise, you guys know I always reply to your comments in the comment section, so I will always do my best to do that in a timely manner. When I first had Benicio, he did have a good latch, what I felt was a really good latch. I didn't experience problems in that area. The latch alone is one big hurdle you have to overcome. There are some mothers that have the most difficult time just getting a proper latch. So I was really blessed in the sense that the latch was never the issue. The first hurdle for me that I had was my milk not coming in, and the second hurdle was dealing with a cluster feeding baby. So let's just talk really quick about what a cluster feeding baby is so that we get that out of the way. A cluster feeding baby is a baby that just wants to feed all day, every day. I was on the extreme side of that. I was on the very extreme side of that. All he wanted to do continuously was be latched. If he wasn't latched, he was very unhappy. And that made it difficult for me because there was no sleep, there was nothing. I mean, it was just breastfeeding all the time. Okay, so let's go back to my milk not coming in. I came home from the hospital the day after my son was born. I was given the option to stay another day, but I was released the day after because everything was great. I opted to go ahead and leave just because it was a little difficult being in the delivery room with people coming in every 30 minutes and it was exhausting. So I thought, like, I just want to go home and be in the comfort of my own bed. I don't want to hear the door knocking every 30 minutes. So I left. I should have stayed there. That was a mistake that we made. We should have stayed and we should have been surrounded by doctors and nurses. While we were getting ready to leave, we noticed that the baby just wanted to be latched on. If not, he was crying. Prior to this, he was very calm. He didn't cry. He was such a good little boy. But as we were leaving, we noticed, like, whoa, he's really starting to, like, change. His demeanor is starting to change. I know it was only 24 hours, but it was very noticeable. So we get home and I immediately latch him. That's all he wanted to do was stay latched. I was being told your baby's stomach is the size of your thumbnail, and if he gets one drop, he's fine. So I really wasn't thinking that he was starving. I just thought he's cluster feeding and this is just part of the process. I had my son Tuesday and I hadn't slept since Sunday. I had an hour and a half of sleep within those 4 days. He was latched the entire time. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that out of a 24-hour period, 20 of those hours were him latched. He was an extreme cluster feeder. I had heard of cluster feeding babies because one of my good friends who had her baby a year prior to me had a cluster feeding baby. I had no idea what it was really. I just knew that her baby wanted to feed all the time. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like, that's all I knew. So I was lucky in the sense that I had her to talk to, because dealing with a cluster feeding baby is extremely difficult. So I am sort of delusional by Friday. By Friday, I am losing it. I mean, like, really losing it. I'm concerned for my mental health, but I am even more concerned for my child. And because, like, when you have a baby, you don't put yourself first, you put your child first. Like, I wasn't even thinking about myself, but there was a big part of my brain that was consumed with, you're not okay right now. So Friday, we went into our pediatrician and had, like, his first checkup, which is almost always really close to the day that you have him, just to follow up and make sure everything is okay. I did kind of notice his skin start to get yellow. It wasn't necessarily a concern, just because I was so out of it that I wasn't thinking things properly. I wasn't taking any action towards anything. I was just in reactive mode. So the pediatrician's concern right away was, he is very yellow and he's lost 11% of his body weight from birth, which is a lot. And for a baby that only weighed 6 pounds, it can look a little extreme because now he's in the 5-pound range. And he's a boy. It just, it wasn't looking really positive. So later on that day, we get a nurse from the pediatrician and she says, you need to take your son into the emergency room. He had a really high jaundice percentage. His sodium levels were really low. And then of course his weight was another big concern. We rush into the hospital. One of the most scariest experiences, especially because he had lost so much weight, just like he was tiny. So like transporting this tiny little human being to a hospital, it was just really traumatizing. He sat under lights to help his jaundice. Immediately the doctors wanted to obviously respect my wishes on wanting to be a breastfeeding mom. So they started asking me to pump. I started pumping on hospital grade pumps, and we would get like my colostrum out and feed him my colostrum. Well, he was still really hungry. So we made a decision as parents, both Alfonso and I, to go ahead and supplement with formula. While he was supplementing with formula, I was pumping. A lot of the times when you feed with formula, people will tell you that you're telling your body that the baby's getting nourishment already, so you don't need to make as much milk. In order to avoid that, we pumped. I was constantly pumping. This is really controversial. I just want to say again, it's stupid that I even have to say this, but I do. I just want to say that this is my journey and this is what worked for me. The tactics that me and my partner and my doctor decided to take might not be tactics that you think are best for you and your family, but this is what worked for us. I hate to even feel like I'm getting aggressive when I say that, but it's so catty out there. And that's another topic that's really sad. So we supplemented with formula, believe it or not. A lot of people don't know that. When we supplemented with the formula, he slept for 2 solid hours, which was amazing. I got to sleep for 2 hours. He got to sleep for 2 hours. It was the most beautiful experience ever. It was just to sleep 2 hours. I have some mommy friends that are like, it was crazy. I had to wake up every 2 hours. And for me, it was like, I haven't slept over an hour and a half within 4.5, like in the total span of 4 days. Like, give me 2 hours, I'll take it. That's where my perspective was coming from. So it was just great to have that. I needed to sleep because I needed to get myself into a sane space again. So going into the NICU was actually, it was one of the most scariest experiences, but it was also one of the best experiences. They had a lactation consultant on the premises, which was extremely helpful. I don't know why I didn't even think about that the first 4 days. There's lactation consultants accessible to all of us all over. WIC has lactation consultants, La Leche League. We don't have an excuse to not reach out to a lactation consultant. For me, I just didn't know. I was completely clueless. So when we got to the hospital, they brought me a lactation consultant right away. She looked at the way I was breastfeeding in terms of my body posture. I would do this thing where I would press my hands so my baby could breathe, and my breasts are pretty large, and now that I'm breastfeeding, they're even larger. It's because I had a boob job. Let's just keep it real, okay? I thought I had to hold my breast in order to breastfeed, and also there was a lot of tension in my shoulders. And the second she said, pay attention to your body, sit back, relax your shoulders down, look at the way you're holding your baby. You don't need to press your breast in. Babies are naturally born with their noses up this way so that they can breathe. Nature itself created babies that way. So there's no need to ever like hold our breasts in, which is another tension that we're just adding to the entire process. And as soon as we did those 2 things, I could already like feel the difference in my body. Now, because we were cluster feeding, my breasts were awful. They were cracked and bruised. And every time he latched, I was in pain, in awful pain, where I would just, I mean, like, I couldn't, like, it was like major pain. And I was in pain because I was cluster feeding, not because he had an improper latch, because his latch was perfect. It wasn't his latch. It was just the amount of time that were spending this way. I was sore and I was bruised and I was cracked and I was bloody all the time. Aside from my nipples being really sore and in a lot of pain, I also had a really painful contracting uterus, which was something that I had no idea that was going to happen. It was like little contractions that I was feeling. From the moment my son latched on, I could feel my uterus contracting, and I would be in a lot of pain, not only from my nipples, but also from my uterus contracting. Something that helped me with that, because it was so severe, was Motrin. I would talk to your doctor before you take anything though. We came home from the hospital, and slowly we started to like not give him formula anymore. I remember someone telling me, oh, you're supplementing? Maybe you're just not making enough milk. And I remember that when I was told that, I just remember like a piercing feeling in my soul. And that day I decided that I would not give him formula anymore. It was probably like a week after we came home from the hospital, and we were just solidly breastfeeding. After about 2 weeks of only breastfeeding, he refused a bottle. When I tried to give him a bottle, till this day, he continues to refuse a bottle. He will not take a bottle. The first 2 months, breastfeeding was a really challenging experience for me. You can ask anyone in my home. I was pretty much locked up in my room, and he was attached to my breast. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go anywhere. I could rarely even shower. It was just him and I all the time, constantly attached. It was by far one of the most difficult tasks I had to overcome. And when I say had to, it was because for me personally, there was no choice. I knew that this is what I wanted to do, and I didn't even think of a plan B. I never even considered maybe I'm just gonna go to straight formula, ever. I never considered that. And I think one of the reasons why I never really gave up is because I never paid attention to how much milk I was pumping. This entire time I had been pumping. When he wasn't cluster feeding, I would pump. I think that had I paid attention and became obsessed with how much milk I was pumping, I would have most definitely quit. That is, I think, the #1 mistake that we make as new moms when we're breastfeeding. If we can only pump out an ounce from both breasts, we think that that's how much baby can get out. And that is completely incorrect. That just means that that is the amount of milk that you can pump. Some women can pump 5-8 ounces from each breast, which I think is incredible. That's amazing. I wish I could do that, but I can't. I am not one of those mommies. I can only pump, I think the most I've ever pumped, and this was like on a banner day when I was engorged and, was 4 ounces from each breast. I normally pump anywhere from 1 to 3 ounces. 3 ounces is on the 3 ounces is on my better days, and 1 ounce out of my breast is on a normal day. So it's not a lot. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I want anyone to take away from this video is just because you pump a little, that doesn't mean that that is what you are giving your child. Like, it doesn't measure how much milk you have. Here is where I think that mommies that can't pump a lot of milk are at a disadvantage. It is really challenging to sustain a child while you're working and pumping very little. I have made a decision to not go completely back to work in a 9-to-5 setting during the first year of my son's life. We're 6 months in. That could potentially change. Sometimes we have to go to work right away. Sometimes some women have to go to work within 2 weeks of having their baby. And if you're not pumping a lot, that can be very detrimental to being able to breastfeed. I think we can all just simply do our very best. And we shouldn't judge anyone based on their own decision. I really believe that fed is best, and I think that that might come to a surprise because I am exclusively breastfeeding, and I do think it's important to breastfeed. At least it's important for me to breastfeed my child, but I completely understand that it is a very difficult task, and just because I was able to overcome and accomplish those things, that doesn't mean that I think I'm better than any other mommy out there, because I'm not. No one can argue with you when you say that the best thing to do is to make sure a child is fed. That is not even an argument. I think it's just one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever been able to experience, and the bond that I have with my son is beautiful. So I'm not even really gonna go into like benefits or anything like that, because we know what the benefits are, and I don't want this to sound like it's the only thing we can do, because like I just said, I think fed is really genuinely the best thing we can do. I do want to talk about the things that helped me get through this process. You obviously need a really strong support group, and some of us do not have those support groups at home. Luckily for those that don't have a strong support group or a strong support system, there are Facebook groups. And that, even though I had a very supportive team, an extremely supportive team, my partner was very supportive, and my sister was also very supportive. Even though she wasn't able to breastfeed, she was still one of my biggest champions. She never discouraged me, even though she wasn't able to do it herself. And it was something that she really wanted to do, which I think is really beautiful. There are times when you need someone to support you when everyone's asleep. That's actually when you need the most support, is when everyone is asleep and you are up breastfeeding. So I'm gonna link all of this information down below, so you don't have to like try to write this down or anything. But Milky Mamas on Facebook is a closed group. That group for me was my all-time savior. I could jump on that closed group at all hours of the night. The group is extremely professional. It is probably the most professional closed group I've ever been in. The closed group will require a lot of information. It's like an entire application to fill out. I think they let you be in the group without any like contracts or anything you have to fill out. I think for me it was like a few weeks, and then afterward they start tagging you so that you can fill out all of this information. It's kind of like a contract. You go over the rules. It has a lot of really good information. They do it for a reason. And it's just a serious group. It's a serious group, and there are admins that have a lot of experience in helping moms and in nursing. They just have a ton of experience, and they really know how to handle situations. Because breastfeeding is so controversial, there are a lot of controversial topics that can arise in a closed group, and they're just really good at regulating the group and making everyone follow the rules. You obviously don't want to get kicked out, because it's such a rich resource for information and support. So I recommend that in terms of support. In terms of material items that I needed for myself constantly were the Breast Friend. I have a video on that. I'll link it down below. That was a lifesaver for me in the beginning. Lanolin, the Lanoche brand, not the Medela brand. I tried all types of brands. Let me just remind you that I was in severe pain and severely cracked. I don't know what is in the Lanoche brand that isn't in the Medela brand, or any other, like, I tried the natural thing. I mean, screw the natural, like the coconut and all the oils mixed together. That did not do anything for me. Now I just use that as a lip balm, because forget about that. A really quick tip is, when you are pumping, every time before you pump, put on some lanolin, because your breast is sore and it's in pain and the pump is dry and it's just kind of like pulling everything. If you're cracked, it's healing. You might have scabs. You kind of want to just put some lanolin on that to moisten up everything before it actually starts extracting the milk and you reopen those cracked nipples. Always have water. I wasn't a snacker. Some people say to have snacks and that helps, especially when cluster feeding. For me, for some reason, I would get kind of like nauseous when I would feed, and the only thing that would help me get through it was water. Another tip was to burp the baby several times. I would read in a lot of articles that it wasn't necessary to burp breastfeeding babies, but that was not the case for me. Every time he unlatched and got fussy, I knew it was time for him to burp. That really helped me in the beginning. In terms of what I consumed in order to help with my milk production, I still consume 2 of these items. This is what helped me, is the mama's milk tea. I would have the tea every single night at around 10 o'clock at night, and then when I woke up in the morning, I would have a lactation cookie. And then during the day, I just made sure to be always hydrated with water. I drank a lot of coconut water in the beginning. I had a lot of granola. I would have a lot of oatmeal, and then of course my placenta pills. And I think that was like pretty much it. I also recently watched a documentary on breastfeeding that I'll link in the description bar below. It's on Netflix. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. I'm so sorry about my baby in the background. He's so vocal these days. That's all he wants to do is communicate, and I hate to ask him to like be quiet. If you have any questions, again, leave those in the comment section down below. And if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Make it an amazing day, guys. I will see you next week.